chance. Leicester have soaked up so much pressure. Fatawi jinking feet to get beyond his man, and the header from Jamie Vardy makes it 2.
Wood should score. Wood cannot go. Yes! Yes! Anthony Knockout has done it.
Tielemans lining one up. Goal! What a brilliant goal by Yuri Tielemans! And the Leicester City fans go absolutely potty.
Ball in behind Damian Vardy. It's 11. It's heaven for Jamie Vardy. Hold the back page. Hold the front page. A Leicester player has smashed the record.
Good evening and welcome back to Blue Tinted Glasses. We've got a little bit different today. I've put it down as an emergency stream because we love an emergency stream on BTG. Mate, Doc, the amount of times that something happens, even if it's minor, and I get a tweet saying emergency stream. So I thought we're going to have an emergency stream when Leicester next score a goal as well. But
actually,
yeah, that deserves one. But no, we are here with an emergency stream to talk all about the accounts that were obviously released yesterday. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. Doc, mate, how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing good. I'm enjoying life. I want to say, worked yesterday in the break. Just as the game started, opened it up, saw us concede the first goal 2 minutes in. I thought, all right, I won't let this ruin my day. Closed it off. Didn't watch for the rest of the game. And that, I'm not really affected by the loss. I think I have accepted relegation now as well. And I had a great day at work. It was, back starting up the season again with my commentator gig. So that was lovely. I'm doing great. And I enjoyed spending today digging a bit deeper into the financial report and seeing how the state of the club looks.
100%. Well, I want to start by bringing this comment up here. Scott said, this isn't me digging anybody out. A certain Leicester fan channel made this out to be going from bad to worse. But if losing 70 million less than the last 2 seasons is worse, then my maths as well. The best thing, and people, you guys watching will, I'm sure, agree. The best thing about BTG is we have a proper balance of personalities, of opinions, and things like that. So I am very much a negative fan, especially now. When I see something, I'm like, oh no, it's shit, it's terrible. But luckily, we have Doc with me today, who it does tend to be more positive, and he has, he's done a great job actually going through the accounts, breaking it down, so that we can talk about it today. So just to everybody in the chat, I'm already seeing questions. Please feel free to get them in. We'll bring them up where necessary and where we have a little break, and we'll talk all about it. Doc, mate, I'll tell you what, I'll hand over to you, mate, and to the presentation, mate.
Yeah, Locks, be sure to bring up the comments. You still are the one responsible for that if anything comes up that is relevant to what we're going over, and then I'll answer it as best as I can. This will be a not comprehensible deep dive, but we're just digging a bit under the surface here, looking at the main takeaways and the most important things I think is relevant for us, because the balance sheet, we have plenty of money in the bank. The debt to equity ratio from Iowa and all these changes, they just show we have a good financial backing, and we definitely have plenty of money. But that doesn't really matter, because in terms of what we're allowed to use in terms of the FFP, that's what we're looking at today. So first of all, a little disclaimer, I am not a financial expert, but I have graduated ZBC, which stands for Zealand Business College in Denmark, where I studied international marketing, and I'm currently studying general business economics at university. So I'm not clueless either, but I am no financial expert. I thought that was important to get important with right off the bat. But I have dressed up a bit today. I've brought in the glasses just to make sure I have a little bit more on my side, right? But
I've got mine as well, mate. Don't worry.
Yeah, the blue tinted one. I will say, a lot of people say this look like a sailor hat if you're not from Denmark. This is when you graduate gymnasium. So blue color as well, because I went to business, a business school, the Leicester way, of course, getting those blue roses. But the main things we will be going over today is just a general overlook of the accounts. What were the results of relegation? What does that mean for a club when you lose this revenue? And what do you need to do? And how has our club handled that situation? Then we'll take a look at the player sales. How much did we make in that? And then, interestingly, in terms of what they were putting into the accounts, there were some things that hinted of things that have happened, but haven't been seen in the accounts yet, that will impact the next year's accounts. And what we're doing in this Premier League season. So I'll go over those as well, and I will make some predictions at the end to how I think our current finances are looking, because what is worth remembering is this was until the end of 30th of June 2024. These accounts are basically almost a year old. So anything that has happened after the 30th of June 2024 is not in these accounts. So buying Bilal Kanoush, Oliver Skip, all of this is not really included and isn't accounted for. The Premier League revenue we have gained, the BC partnership, all of these things are not accounted for, and they will be accounted for in the next period. And that is a key takeaway.
Yeah, for sure. Again, there's already some comments here about taking loans out on future TV money and things like that. We will talk about that. It is mentioned. Paying around 9% on loans. Again, we'll talk about this kind of stuff. Neil says, Duck says the BTG financial year ends in May, so get your tax returns in now before he finds you. And yeah, 105 million on wage. Yes, we're going to talk all about that. So yeah, and remember, I mean, I'm Doc says he's not a financial expert, but he is more of an expert than I am. And there's many people in the chat which also will probably not have a clue at what we're talking about. So that is why Doc is here to do his best at explaining it for us.
Yeah, I think in general, just say this early, I will probably be a bit more positive than a lot of other people. But that's just my opinion on all of this situation. But how does it look in the Prem? Well, we won't know until April 2026. We'll have a few hints that we'll get on later, but I want to make this very clear. Anything relating to what's going on in the Prem and the money we're making now, we won't know for sure. So just keep that in mind. But let's start with one of the most important things and most talked about things, the turnover. This is what the club in principle makes in revenue. We have in the accounts, it's just a straight screenshot from the accounts, the 2023 and the 2024. And well, obviously, there is a massive decrease here. And the two main activities that are decreasing is the sponsorship and advertisements from 32 million to 21 million. Why does that decrease? Well, losing our Premier League status means we get exposed to less viewers. The partnerships will be paying less for, the right to be on our shirt. We had King Power back. I assume they had a better deal than what FBS had. We had a few years ago when we were in the Prem battling for Europe and all these things. But the main one, and one of the things I've been talking a lot about, is the lack of broadcasting rights from the Premier League. 2023, we didn't have any European competitions. We made £114 million in broadcasting rights and club competitions we were playing in terms of the FA Cup. And mainly, and this is very much mainly the Premier League, losing about more than half of that is obviously massive for the turnover, right? We were down to 105 million in income compared to the 177 when we were in the Premier League. That is a huge loss. And you know why? Again, it's the lack of Premier League. That's what this basically boils down to. And that's the key takeaway. And this is not something the club can control, or the club can control it, but not Susan Whedon. This is based on the pitch performances mainly.
Yes.
Yeah,
I was going to say,
go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, so that broadcasting rights and club competitions, that is basically the TV money and the prize money, if I'm not mistaken, in one figure there. So, and people always talk about how, just from being in the Premier League, you get, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, yeah.
And then for every place that you finish, higher, that's like, a few million or a couple million or something like that each place, which is why you see a lot of people who report on the club and stuff talk about how the club budgeted for I think top 8. So just finishing as low as we did, I think it was 17th, right, that season. You lose so much money, competition money just for where you finish from budgeting 8th to finishing 17th. That's a big miss as well. But obviously now we're looking at 2024 compared to 2023.
That is the key difference, right? And remember, this includes parachute payments. So if we remained in the championship, this would have continued to go down. And obviously, it'll go back up next year for being in the Prem. When we go down, it'll go back down. But this is a thing that is obviously detrimental to a football club that is budgeting to be able to spend way more than they all of a sudden were. And this comes in to the wages. The club had to do a massive restructuring. And this is what I want to say is really, really impressive. They've managed to get the wages down from £180 million to 93 million. That is a massive, massive decrease. And well, what are the key reasons? Well, according to what they say in the report, relegation clauses were in many of the contracts. I know Victor Christiansen had one in his since being signed in January. I don't know how many of the other players had. We don't get all the fine details, but in general, they said that was the clause of it, or the cause of it. Yuri Tielemans and Ayosi Perez and whoever else walked on a free, those wages were off the books. And then obviously, a lot of the new players are on less money in terms of what are being reported at the very least. I know someone like Connor Cody is being reported to be on quite a heavy wage, and I do think that is true. But someone like Abdul Fatawu, Mavididi will definitely have been cheaper than your Harvey Barneses, your James Madisons, and whatever, right?
And I would like to say as well, by the way, that when we were seeing all these reports from financial experts online, probably towards the end of 2024, talking about the PSR, Leicester are going to get points deductions in January. They're going to be announced. I think one of them, Kieran Maguire, who's a quite well-known one, he actually said that, the only way Leicester really avoid a points deduction is if they basically half their wages, right? Which is very difficult. But I mean, you look at the figures there, mate, they basically did half the wage.
Yeah, that's impressive. This is genuinely really, really impressive to look at. We had a problem before, and I'll get into that a bit later, that even when we were in the Premier League, we were spending too much money on wages. So to all of a sudden lose that guaranteed Premier League revenue, you have to make up for so much more in the wage department. And that is a really, really impressive, I want to say, reduction in wage. And especially when there are players you all of a sudden can't offload, maybe than the last year, no one wants them, you can't get any decent transfer bids for them. Some wage is really hard to get rid of, and I think they did a very good job considering the circumstance. So is it good enough? Maybe you already hinted a bit at it, right? Yes. And it's going in the right direction. I made a small little calculation here in Excel. This is the wage to turnover ratio, something people talk a lot about, how much money do you generate and how much do you spend on your players' wages. In 2023, when we were in the Premier League and had all this broadcasting revenue, we spent 116% roughly. To be able to lose that much revenue from the Premier League, but still reduce your wages by more than what you lost in revenue is really impressive. And it's a step in the right direction. Obviously, you don't still want to spend more than 100% of your turnover on wages, but it's a massive step in the right direction, but there's still more to be done.
Yeah, I think, this is one thing I think we should stress as well, because although your outlook on this, Doc, is positive in terms of it's going in the right direction, I think it is important to remember that 102% is still bad. It's still very, very bad. I mean, I think in the relegation season, the last one, we were the first ever club in Premier League history to have a wage bill higher than the turnover. And to now be in the chat, for what the period these accounts are for, to be in the Championship with a 102% wage turnover, it's still not good enough. But then again, I hear where you're coming from, Doc. They need to get it down, and they have gone a step in the right direction. But what I would ask you though, Doc, is, and here's a question from JC. I'm not convinced they've improved. It's just lower quality players in most cases.
That is true. You get what you pay for, right? Mavididi on lower wages than Harvey Barnes. Who would you rather have in the Premier League? Well, you'd rather have a Harvey Barnes. To some degree, you get what you're paying for. There will be a point of diminishing returns, right? When you pay these big wages for these star players, where you get less of a better player in terms of how much you spend for your pound. But I agree, obviously, this is still a wage to turnover ratio that needs to be improved. But considering you lost such a remarkable amount of your revenue in terms of the Premier League broadcasting revenue and the sponsor money as well, I am impressed they even managed to get the wage to turnover ratio down. So it is a step in the right direction. This needs to be taken lower, and it needs to go lower for a few more years. And it is a massive cost-cutting exercise, but I think at the very least, Susan Whelan and the rest of the guys responsible for that shows they're competent enough to do that. Because it is improving, and I think it's impressive they managed to improve it so much, considering the circumstance. But as you say, Lux, there is still much to be asked.
And you're right. You said it earlier on in the stream, but the Premier League one, it will be interesting. We're a year away from it, but it will be interesting to see how that looks, because obviously the players that took that reduction going down to the Championship, when we return, they will then go back up to 100%. Of their salary, and who knows what it looks like then. But we'll find out in a year. Unfortunately, it is a year away, but we are heavily now focusing on obviously 2024. So.
But it was definitely a step in the right direction. That cannot be argued. So heading on to player sales, this was also a huge part of the thing we had to do when we went down. We lost 3 of these lovely lads. Harvey Barnes went to Newcastle, Castagna to Fulham, and Dewsbury Hall when we went back up to Chelsea. Hurts, man. It absolutely hurts. But as you can see, a screenshot here, in the year, they sold for £72 million, basically. And those were mainly from Harvey Barnes, Castagna, and Dewsbury Hall. I don't know if George Hurst is in these accounts as well, or if he was in the former ones where we also raised £72 million. But I am not too sure of that. Either way, though, it isn't a huge difference. It's a few million quid, so not gonna change the world. But this will be huge. You'll see this in the context when we go on to the full picture later. But this was absolutely crucial in terms of our financial report. And heading on to another way we made some money is due to Enzo Maresca. I have this little video there playing as well. We miss him. We definitely do. We made £10 million from him, or that was the reported figure at the very least. We, in extra operating income, made £12.7 million. And how much of that is Enzo? The reported number, as I said, is 10 million. But they also mentioned a confidential settlement of a commercial dispute, which we don't really know. I think, like you've theorized, it might have been Everton and Forest after they broke the rules and we got relegated on the back of that.
Yeah, there was obviously speculation and reports that we were taking, not just us, other clubs as well, were taking Everton and Forest to court for, ironically, for breaching PSR and them staying up in the division and us getting relegated. So nothing really came out of it. I think it was going to be settled, but yeah, it looks like it may have been. So I also did read as well that Enzo cost 10 million, of course, but then there was maybe $1 million on top for his staff. So yeah, this is, I suppose this is one of the drawbacks, right, with the accounts. One of the negatives is that some things are merged into one.
Exactly.
So I remember the ones from the year before where Rodgers' sacking was included in a figure with lots of other things, and it was hard to actually work out how much he was paid off. But yeah,
that is a massive challenge, and that's why we can get an idea, but we can never really know the full picture, right? We talked about wages, for example. We don't know for a fact if the new players came in had a lower wage, or it simply just was the fact that the others were making so obscenely much that when Tielemans went on a free to Aston Villa, we just saved so much. So there are many more minute details in it we will never really be sure about. We can only go off the reported figures and then obviously the accounts. But going on, this is the full picture. And again, I don't want to look at other Premier League clubs. I want to see how we did in the past and then which direction we are going. And taking a look at the 13-month period, it's a bit of a longer period we had when we moved our accounting end date to the 30th of June last year. So it's a 13-month period, but we lost £90 million basically when we got relegated, or not in the relegation year, in the year we remained in the Premier League. And I think we got 8th that season, right? Where we just barely missed Europe before it all went wrong.
Yeah, and I think it's also important just to, I'm sure people already know, but the reason it was 13 months was because of we moved it so that we could basically find the loophole, right, to avoid the PSR sanctions for the year before the year we got relegated. So we extended that reporting period so that we were an EFL club at the time of us filing the accounts, right? You get what I'm saying, Doug? You're right. This was the relegation season, and they moved it. So, and that obviously ended up helping us in the points deduction case while we were in the championship, because we were in this dark void between both of them when the accounting period ended. But in general, we talked about it, right? The turnover, that was definitely reduced, and again, due to the lack of Premier League revenue. The cost of sales, wages are included in this and are a huge part of it. I tried to see if I could find more what these cost of sales account for, but they didn't really go into the full specifics. But a huge part of this reduction is due to the wage. So you can say the main thing they reduced on was the wage bill, but there might have been other cost-cutting measures around the club that I weren't really able to find. And again, the administrative expenses barely decreased, but a slight decrease. So I guess Susan Whelan didn't get as fat of a bonus, or maybe John Rotkin didn't get his Christmas extra £1 million or whatever he takes there. But the main difference
is the reduction in cost of sales is bigger than the reduction in turnover. The extra operational income from sacking, or not sacking, but losing Enzo to Chelsea, and then the player sales. This goes into a bit more the nitty-gritty of the debt we have. We have a lot of debt we normally take out when we sell players. We take it up against our assets as well, and we have to repay those over time. So there is more to that, and I didn't really want to look fully into it because it's not the key part of the figure. But just know we still have some debt to be paid. We have a lot of debt, but we don't have enough for me to be worried. There is nothing that has my alarm bells ringing. We have more assets than we have debt secured against those assets. So we should be totally fine on that regard. So no worries there. But we come up with a small loss of 18 or 19 million pounds, really, and I think this is not phenomenal, but it's impressive considering we lost such a key revenue source in the Premier League revenue.
Yeah, and I think, there was a comment earlier, and I can't find it now, but somebody mentioned about luck, and of course, I suppose with certain things, you can say that. I mean, our manager got poached. We got £10 million from that, right? That's a bonus. But the club would have rather not lose the manager, right? Everybody would have rather Enzo Maresca as the manager going into the start of this season. But also, Doc, just on the Macquarie Bank thing, I was under the impression with how that's been working is we have taken a lump sum out of the bank alone, and then the club that we've sold the player to is paying the installments. Which
that is some of the loans, right? I did see we had some loans up against our assets as well, other assets.
Yes.
But you're totally correct. We'll get into that a bit later. I did see a comment from Terry in terms of the accounts. Dewsbury Hall was included in this set of accounts, as we can see here from the screenshot. What is it? James Madison was in the former set of accounts. They sold him before the 30th of June 2023 to help with this set of accounts you can see here. He is a massive part of this sale. And while we sold Dewsbury Hall at the end of this accounting period, and Harvey Barnes and Timothy Castagna, they make up for this figure.
Yes, and I have heard from other people like Kieran Maguire, who's been on the channel a while ago. We'll have to get him back on soon, but he did say that he explained that a player's sale, even if it technically, because the sales, when you hear about a transfer, it's happened before you hear about it. So if a player sale goes through on the 1st of July, for example, that doesn't mean that it's going to go on the next year's account. As long as there is paperwork and things like that, then you can file it on the previous year account. So that is why Dewsbury Hall has been included. I can't remember the exact date of when we heard about it, when it was announced.
Probably 2nd or 3rd of July, I think. It was right after.
There you go. But it definitely happened it's definitely on these accounts. And I think if you think back to the Michael Golding deal that we assume was a part of that Dewsbury Hall deal, I think that's going on next year's accounts, or this 2025 basically. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it is right. So this is massive, right? If you think back to the situation when we got promoted, there was this talk about we needed to do something to avoid PSI, and while it hurt at the time, losing Dewsbury Hall, it was needed. It was necessary for financial fair play. You can see it here. We still lost 19 million, even if we didn't lose Enzo, who I do believe the club wanted to keep a hold of. We would just have needed to sell someone else, maybe a Victor Christiansen, or a lot of our players were worth a lot more than they are now due to the belief that they would be able to compete in the Premier League. So we would have had to sell someone else if we didn't get rid of Enzo or get rid of him. But if Chelsea didn't come and nab him, I want to say instead. But those were both key in the accountings, because otherwise, when you add the losses up, we would have definitely broken FFP. But let's jump on a bit here.
Say one thing here? Because there is a comment about this, the training ground, and I know you're going to speak about. You've got something to speak about Beaver Drive, and we will talk about that. But this is a slightly different question, because I think David's asking about how Chelsea have sold the women's team and sold the training ground to themselves, basically. And I did actually do a bit of research on this, why Leicester can't do it. I'm sure there is a way for them to do it, but apparently it's all down to the ownership structure. So Chelsea's ownership is kind of split into like multiple different entities, if that makes sense. Whereas we are basically King Power, and I don't even think King Power anymore. I think the club is now owned by Iowat, Shanahan and Private. It's no longer owned by King Power. That changed recently, actually, on Company's House. So I think it's a little bit more complex for Leicester to do it. Obviously, Chelsea find their loopholes. They've got £1 million lawyers and all of that.
And they have multiple organizations, right? I think it's like selling it to Clear Lake Capital or whatever. Like it's a shady loophole. It is a very shady loophole, and I haven't looked enough into it. And there isn't much public information out there because it's a very under the table deal, right? Just to play around a bit with the accounts, and the clubs will definitely do the best here to make themselves look as good as possible. So they'll hide some of the stuff that we don't need to know. They have a right to, inform us on some things, but they don't need to show us the wages of every single individual player or all of these small, minute details. I see a question as well from Deedlers earlier. Had we stayed up last time, we would have still been at 116. We would not. If we go back to the wage turnover, it includes the wage. I believe, and this is obviously hypothetical, had we stayed in the Premier League and not gotten relegated, this wage reduction would have still come. Not to this extent, because the clauses would have been activated, but Yuri Tielemans and all of these other guys would still have left. If we just barely survived in the Premier League, I still think it's likely James Maddison would have left. The club knew they needed to change their wage structure because it did get out of whack. The people were earning too much compared to what we were making. And it would have definitely improved, especially, remember, because our turnover would have still been around this same level. We would have still had that Premier League revenue. So I still think it would have taken a step in the right direction, and maybe even more, but that is a hypothetical. We'll never really know for sure. So to summarize on these takeaways from this year's financial, 2023 was truly a horrible year. My conclusion is that the club has done well to get it in the right direction. But as I say as well, we are far from finished, right? You still want that wage to turnover ratio to be even better. But they did a good job, especially considering the relegation, really making it an almost, I thought, impossible task. And they just barely managed to squeak it in, right, to avoid FFP. Player sales will yet again be key when we go down. We've seen it here now, how key they've been for the past 2 years in terms of making our accounts look somewhat reasonable. And again, just to make it clear, it's impossible to look into the small details like the individual wages to really get a grip of where the issue lies. But the wage structure is improving, but there is still work to be done there.
Yeah, for sure. I've put a comment. I just wanted to say, I don't think this is true, JC. I did see a similar tweet. I'm pretty sure there is no link. They may have done business with each other before at some point, but as far as I'm aware, BC Game is not a sister company of King Power or anything like that, mate. I don't think there's any evidence of that at all. But yeah. Also, though, just talking about what you've got on screen here, I mean, player sales will be key when we go down again. I think there has been statements and things like that in the past recently from Leicester suggesting that this is the route they are going to go down in future. They, we did do that. We followed that kind of transfer strategy for so long. And obviously when Brendan Rodgers was at the club, he clearly didn't want to keep doing it. I think it was kind of something that he pushed. From what I've heard from like Rob Tanner and things that he pushed for no player sales because he wanted a squad capable of finishing in the top 4. He didn't want to lose James Maddison, just after a top 4 battle. So we didn't sell anybody and we got our fingers burnt, Duck, at the end of the day. That's what happened. Even if we hadn't have been relegated, we might have got away with it in a way, but we got relegated and it was kind of like a double whammy, right? It was a double uppercut to us.
Yeah, we really got burned missing out on the Champions League revenue for those few years as well. We got 5th. It's a culmination of many things. Poor recruitment, those bottlings of the top 4s when we've been in that for most part of the season. There are many things that go into the situation we currently find ourselves in. But I'm happy to see that the club is now taking the measures to start fixing it and getting it in the right direction. I believe Susan Whelan said in the last report, this will take years, and it will. Because you can't just from one day to another completely flip a wage structure on its head. There are contracts that need to be, running out or renegotiated to get to lower wages. All of these things can't be done in a day. But at the very least, they are aware of the issue. And now I have had proof that they are working, and they've done well, in my opinion, to get it on the right track. Yep. I think if we jump on, this is what they said about the PSR concerns. I'm not going to read it out in full, having read it myself. there is nothing groundbreaking. It's the same as always, right? We are doing our best to stay within the bounds. We'll be in touch with the important regulators if push comes to shove and we need to. And the thing, if there's anything to take away, this was after they talked about the wage reduction, and as they said, it was necessary to undertake after they lost the Premier League revenue. So
there is an interesting bit there as well, obviously, about PSR or PNS saying that if the club was found to have failed to achieve compliance, which were held to be applicable to the club in its specific circumstances, then there would be a risk of sanction. But at the current time, it is impractical to estimate the likely impact on any such sanction. It does say as well, obviously, the club continues to receive exceptionally strong support in both financial and non-financial terms from King Power Limited and Shanhana Prava. Yeah, so, some people have said, that King Power are broke, and we've heard so many times that's not true. The problem at the moment is not being able to spend. That's the problem because of PSR. And but the thing to go back at them with that though, Doc, is that the reason they can't spend is because of how the club has been managed financially in the past. That's so you mentioned Susan Whelan says this is going to take years. The reason it's going to take years, Doc, is because they fucked up.
They spent years fucking up. I think, this is a year-long fuck up. Some things in Susan Whelan and Jen Rutkin's control, others in the fact that our squad just bottled it. Then you can obviously make the argument that goes back to recruitment or how much power Brendan Rodgers was given in hiring his own head of recruitment. There are many things that build into this. But I think the biggest fuck up I want to say to the guys at the top, it's the wage structure. That is their biggest mistake. Giving these players that much in wages, struggling to then offload them, not being able to sell at the right time, allowing Brendan Rodgers to not, have that one massive sale to make up for Daka, Sumara, and Vestergaard coming in that one summer. Those are all things that build towards this moment. So, we had years of just paving over the cracks because we were battling for top four. We had a higher revenue, and when it all came crashing down harder than anyone expected with a relegation, the issues that were looming and would have become an issue regardless of if we stayed up became more than glaringly obvious.
Yeah, just here as well, Dabs. I also don't like it because I feel like some of the statements that we've had in the past from the club feels very, poor us. This is unfair. PSR is unfair. Two things are really important to remember here. That this club, Susan Whelan, in particular, and Top, they actually voted in favor of these PSR rules. Okay, there's the first thing you need to remember. Secondly, the PSR excuse is a valid excuse now. To say, well, we can't spend what we want to spend because we're worried that we're going to get hit with a points deduction. But if you look deeper into it, like I just said, the reason we are on the knife edge with PSR, it's their fault. They've been pushing how they manage the club. Yeah, exactly. So
it all ties back to them. But right now in the situation, they have dug themselves in the excuse that they've created the issue, and they're now using that issue as an excuse, you could say.
Yes,
in a sense. But it is very much a valid excuse because they can't reasonably spend.
Yeah.
And the drop in revenue obviously will make the tight grip that PSR already has over us even worse. And it's a never-ending cycle, right? Losing that Premier League revenue was detrimental to the rebuild that already needed to be done, and just made it, from changes to wholesale changes in terms of the structure and the wage. So,
well, you said then never-ending. Well, you said never-ending cycling, and it is a cycle if we look at it just the last 2 years for Leicester, because in that last season we were tied. Our hands were tied with PSR, so we weren't able to strengthen with the necessary quality. We got relegated, even though we shouldn't have got relegated. We did get relegated, and then because of the financial pressures of getting relegated, we're then not allowed to spend when we come back up. And because we weren't able to spend enough when we came back up, we're going to go back down again. You know what I mean? So it is a vicious cycle.
It is exactly right. And now we're going to go down. We'll have less revenue again. The players we'll be getting will be of even less quality. Like the way the cycle is broken is if your recruitment is so good that the players you get paid less than what they should be considering their level, right? You find someone who no one has seen from Colombia, who you plug in. His name is Moises Caicedo. He gets paid 5K a week, but he's playing like he's prime. I don't know who. I mean, Cesc Fabregas or whoever you want to say, right? You know, so, or N'Golo Kante. Like those things, that recruitment is the best way to break this cycle, where you cheat the system by simply finding the hidden gems. And yeah, but that is obviously tough. I think Martin Glover is doing an okay job, but when the manager also has power, so we can sign someone like Skip for 25 million, right? It's all a bit useless. But let's move on a bit. And here's a fun fact. We talked about Beaver Drive before, and I think the reason I've brought this in here is because there's been talk of, could we just sell it? Well, it's been valued at £10 million. So nothing game-changing, I want to say. Like, it is definitely a financial lever you have if you can, find someone to sell it to where it isn't breaking the law or anything insider trading, colluding, right? But it is a financial lever that we have available, as Barcelona would say, but we don't need to pull it because it is a minor thing. Like it's a drop in the water, right? Like the 10 million, it's unlikely that will be what's needed. But if it is, you could sell it.
Yeah. I think this is something that has been discussed a lot recently about selling Beaver Drive. I think some of the arguments, some of the cases put forward are that Seagrave is big enough, to hold the Leicester City men's team, the Leicester City under-21s team, and the Leicester City women's team. It is big enough to hold all three of them teams. So some people see it as maybe unnecessary to keep hold of this land.
I think that's a fair point.
But I also see, that there is also a bit of sentimental value behind it. Of course, Beaver Drive, it's where the club have been for years. We won the Premier League at that training ground, and I believe they still hold a lot of community sessions for kids and things like that. So there is still purpose for it. But in this case, Doc, we didn't really need to sell it, did we? We didn't need to sell it. So in the future, if there is a case, okay, we actually do need this £10 million, and I suppose that would be considered at that point. As Sean said here, unless you're actually desperate for the cash, £10 million is not worth it.
Be pure desperation. And you can see, according to themselves, it has also been used by the regular Leicester City FC team in some capacity. If that is youth teams or community events or whatever you're saying, right? Like both the men and women, at the very least, according to them, get some value out of it. I see the comment from Richard. I think maybe we can pull that up as well in terms of Glover. I do want to speak a bit in defense of him because I think, Hermansen, brilliant signing. Abdul Fattahu, who we know was someone he recommended to Enzo, brilliant signing. Skip in the championship was brilliant and definitely has repaid his transfer fee.
Winks.
I think, Winks.
Skip,
I think
Winks.
Winks. Sorry, definitely not Skip. I think Mavididi as well for getting us promoted back up, repaid his small transfer fee. I think this season Bilal El-Kanouchi is really the only good one, and that's the only one that feels like a Glover signing. But he's definitely had. I don't know if I can still say more hits than misses because this summer window was horrible, but he's definitely got more than one hit, and I think he was crucial in the recruitment that led to us getting back up.
Yeah, I suppose the way you look at it, mate, is we're led to believe that the managers have that much, have a big say in the type of player that we bring in. And, Enzo, who liked a certain style of player, under Enzo, Martin Glover pretty much only had hits. Hermansen, Fattahu, Winks at the time, even Callum Doyle, not the greatest of players, but I think, more
but it was
than
a loan, right? We didn't
championship
spend
level.
15 million on him. Like he definitely did what he needed to. Same for Yunus Akgün. He had some crucial moments, and he was only
and he's having a great season this year.
Yeah, he's having a cracking season. And I think the only real miss last season was Connor Cody, and he would have probably had a bigger impact that season if he didn't get injured in the first training game for a few months, and then Vestergaard turned out to be the second coming of Jesus under Enzo Maresca.
No, I agree. And like I said, it's such a difficult conversation to have about recruitment, and we've tried for months and months on this channel to try and pinpoint who is to blame. Obviously, Rudkin's the one who gets a lot of the flack, but it's not, we all know it's not just Rudkin. It's impossible to say. I mean, I tried my best to get information out of Rob Tanner as to what the the strategy is and how the decisions are made. And, you know, from what he said, it kind of is a collective. So, yeah, we just don't know. We just don't know who is exactly to blame. But it is a collective. You know, with the hits, people have to take. You know, people take the credit if it's a miss. You then have to take the criticism. So
yeah, and yeah, you are completely right. I mean, no one is completely scot-free in terms of things that have gone wrong for what we're in now as a football club. But let's move on. I think I still have some final thoughts remaining. You know, these were some of the fines I found in terms of the text that they were saying. For example, this is what we spent in the Premier League season so far. I don't know for sure if this also includes the £3 million on Woyo Koulibaly in the winter. I do think so, though. I'm pretty confident it is. But this was after the 30th of June 2024. They have spent, excluding the tax, £66.7 million in transfers. So that is the summer transfer. That is this whole transfer window, or all our transfers in the Prem. They have cost 66.7. I'm pretty sure Caleb Okoli as well was after the 30th of June. So I know all the other signings at the very least were not, you know, just re-signing players on like Yannick Vestergaard. So that is a lot of money.
Yeah, and a lot of this does get amortized, doesn't it? As well. So like, for example, 25 million on Oliver Skip. You know, for PSR reasons, that will not be 25 million coming out of, you know, of the PSR allowance, if you like, this season. That'll be spread over the course of his contract, most likely, if the club decided to do it that way, of course. It's what Chelsea do. Why is Wesley Fofana on an 8-year contract? Because they can spread the £80 million over 8 years, basically.
I do believe that loophole after Chelsea has not been closed with the contract. Like, it goes max of 5 years, even if the contract is longer. But you're absolutely right. That's what they did with Enzo, Caicedo, all these guys. They managed to get the whole crop of wonder kids in, right? And get them on those 10-year deals and then make them look like £5 million signings for each year for just 10 years instead. Or 10 million, that wouldn't be right for the 100 million fee. But this is a transfer spend. We also took out a loan against the revenue of Dewsbury Hall's transfer fee. This is completely standard. We've done it before with Wesley Fofana, for example, and it's simply to give us the cash up front. So I believe that we were able to spend on these guys. And yeah, I think maybe the Dewsbury Hall just went straight into the summer accounts, to be honest. But something that I don't think went into this year's accounts, because it is since 20th or 30th of June, the club have entered into discounting facility with Macquarie Bank. It's again them that we've loaned from, that we have forwarded the process from the Premier League shared revenue distribution. So we've taken out a loan, you know, against the Premier League shared revenue we will be getting, or at the very least some of it. How much, we don't know.
And we did do that the last season we were in the Premier League. We did the exact same thing as well, yeah.
And luckily this time it's not up against future. This is, you know, guaranteed, I believe, Premier League revenue, because we will be getting Premier League revenue this season. I think what scared me about the last time we did it was we did it for future seasons where, you know, our spot wasn't secured yet, right? So we took out some loan on that. I think this was probably done to allow us to spend in terms of financial fair play for the next year's accounts, to be able to spend this figure. That is why we took out, at the very least, this loan. I think this loan might have been for this year's accounts, but we won't know for sure. But they have definitely spent money, and they've taken out a loan to, you know, cover or balance out that investment, you could say.
Yeah. Like, this is something we've had dealings with Macquarie for a long time. I think it's there's a lot of people that don't like it. I'm on about the bank as well. I think they're a little bit shady themselves, but it is something that we've you know, a bank that we've dealt with for a long time, and it has helped us in other situations. Whether it helped us or not this time round, who knows if it helped us avoid PSR issues, things like that. But yeah, I'll tell you what, it didn't help us do, Doc. It didn't help us spend in January. You know, we spent 3 million.
That is true. Yeah, that is true, and I guess that's because we blew the whole bank in the summer, right? With Steve Cooper in charge. But yeah,
and to pay out Cooper probably.
Yeah, I had to pay him out. That will also be included in the next accounts, and maybe even for Ruud as well. Yeah, we'll see what happens right in the future. I'm gonna go now on to my gut feelings and predictions. This is not guaranteed, but from the accounts, the way we were going, and some of the things we will know happens for the next account with what we've seen in terms of transfer spend. These are some of my main takeaways for how it's looking right now, like in the Prem, and what I think. I believe the loans taken out are mainly to cover our transfer spend, make sure we don't, blow past the FFP threshold for the current Premier League season. The wage has definitely increased in the Prem. We've heard that, I believe, was kind of Cody's wage got increased. A lot of the other guys will have gone back up to the wage they were in the Premier League as well. I imagine someone like D. Cordova-Reid coming in on a free as an experienced Prem player, probably earning quite a bit of a pretty penny. Jordan Ayew as well, I'd imagine. Definitely not a cheap player in terms of wage. So the wage has increased, but so has our turnover. Because remember, if we go all the way back to the turnover, our turnover will essentially look like this again. This is roughly speaking, right? It should look like this. Because we're having a bad season in the Prem, we won't get much money from the revenue share, but we get the broadcasting rights. That's a huge part of it. Our sponsorship will go up again due to the BC game deal. We were told that was the biggest deal the club has ever had, so that should get it towards this amount again. If it's exactly 177 million, we don't know. But our turnover is also increased. I can guarantee you that at the very least for this next accounting period will go down again when we then get relegated. So we'll have a one-time improvement in that.
Just add as well, by the way, on the revenue, I just did a little search because I couldn't remember the number. So apparently just from being in the Premier League, no matter where you finish, just from being there, you're guaranteed about 95 million.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot. So
a lot. And remember, you get half of that the first season you're down in the Championship. So we had extremely high revenue from being in the Championship last season. So the increase won't be a full 95 million extra. Be aware of that, but it will a sizable, massive difference. And that's why I'm hopeful that our wage turnover ratio will improve for the 24-25 season, because I will be very disappointed if the people working up at the top of the club manage to, despite the big increase in turnover due to the new sponsorship with BC Game and the Premier League revenue, manage to grow our wage by more. That would be severely disappointing, despite the wage bill obviously growing again. There is no doubt about that will grow, but hopefully our wage to turnover ratio will continue to head in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Go on.
I mean, but there is still the main takeaway that we will have to make sales and wage cuts when we get relegated. We know the players we signed this summer, from what I remember, did all have relegation clauses in them, right, for their wage. So some of that will be done automatically. Some players will walk at the end of their deal. Danny Ward, Daniel Iversen, for example. But they will walk, and we will have to make some sales. I am hopeful, though, as long as we haven't spent an abundance on wage this year, that we might have a chance of retaining some of our gems when we go down. Both of them, I don't think so. I don't think that's happening. But I hope that as long as we haven't spent over the budget this time around and blown the wage budget wide open again, the lost revenue we'll have to make up for will be less due to the fact that our wage is already lower than when it was when we went down. So we have to make up for less of a loss. I think Hermansen is definitely gone. Someone like Ndidi has a relegation clause, Christiansen.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that we manage to keep one of these two players. I think Fatawu is the most likely, as someone says in chat. He's injured, right? So hasn't really gotten to showcase himself. But I'm hopeful we get to keep at least one of these guys.
Yeah, I think as well, by the way, when you're talking about budgeting, there is one thing that we definitely have not done this year compared to 2023, and that is budgeting for 8th. We're definitely not, we definitely haven't budgeted for 8th. So, what the club should have done, Doc, obviously, again, we'll find this out next year, but the club should have budgeted for relegation this season, to be honest with you. And anything above that then is a bonus. You can't go spending as if you're a top 10 team when the chances are you're going to get relegated. We do have some questions to go through. Doc, is that the end of the presentation?
I do believe so. Yes, that is the end of the presentation.
Lovely stuff. He's got got the Anil presentation skills now. Putting the PowerPoints together. So there's a question. Let me go back to the start. First of all, quick shout out to Ant. Thank you for extending the membership now 6 months. He says, I'm taking up badminton. I hate football. David left his comment before the stream started. He says, to me, this is a great set of figures, considering the last few sets of figures. Don't forget that the women's team get deducted from that. So for PSR, there are things called allowables, aren't there?
Yeah, allowable.
Basically, they
As
can.
well. Things spent on that, and there are many things that will make it. Because if you go back and look at the past 3 years, just our straight up losses have obviously been above the threshold, but we've been below when you take the deductibles away. But exactly how much they are, again, we don't know the nitty gritty fine details. But yeah, I agree. It is definitely a big step in the right direction. The work is far from finished. It definitely is, but it is a good step. I'm really happy with the direction they're going, and I mean it when I say I'm quietly optimistic that we'll be able to keep one of, if not both, Fatawu and El Kanouche. Fatawu is the most, the most realistic for me. But as long as the club have learned from their mistake, which they should have, we should be in a better position than last time. And then it depends on what the EFL does, right? For the breach we had when we went down before. Because if they come after us with everything they got, it could change everything. But if that doesn't happen, I'm quietly optimistic.
Just to clarify, Aaron, Skip isn't in these accounts.
He will be in next year's accounts.
Oh yeah, next year. So we'll see them next year. So I think somebody in our group chat said the same thing. Oh, if we hadn't have signed Skip, no. But if we hadn't have signed Winks and Cody, then yeah, maybe. But yeah, no. Skip will be in next year's. 93 M's on wages. Yes, but Duck, half of what they were the year before.
Yeah, it was 170 something the year before.
180.
180. That is a massive reduction. So they did really good on that part.
Yeah, 100%. Again, obviously, JC said it's an improvement, but I am concerned with this summer's business for sure. If you talk about last summer, obviously Skip, IU, I suppose it is a concern, Doc, but £66 million in the Premier League, it's not a lot of money. And that almost sounds like a team that's budgeted for relegation, maybe, because that's just like the standard now, isn't it? £66 million in the summer, that's just a standard club spending now.
Yeah, that's not out of this world at all. Obviously, for us, it's a huge jump back up, right? Because that's a thing we have to remember. In the Championship, the fees are a lot lower as well. £7 million was a big spend for many clubs, but for us, spending that, I believe, Harry Winks and Mavididi, like each of them. So I think we'll be able to spend some money. I don't think it will be too much. I don't expect us to go out and spend £1 million. I think, in particular, if the manager really wants to retain someone like Bilal El Kanouche or Fatawu, the spend we would then have a chance of spending on other players will then go down because we're not getting the profit from selling a Fatawu for 40 or a Bilal for 25 or 30 million or whatever. But I'm quite optimistic. We know some players will go. Mads Hermansen is dead set on leaving. I mean, he knows he needs to take the next step, and he's done everything he can with us. And Didi, Christiansen, I think a lot more will follow him out the door, sadly. But I think it's right because it is quite clear there's a full rebuild going at the club. And I'm cautiously optimistic for the financial sides of things at the very least, that in a few years' time, FFP won't be as big of a problem.
JC says as well, Doc, we need to spend wisely going forward. I mean, this is... recruitment now, everything we talk about football, whether it's on the pitch or behind the scenes, it does really come down to recruitment. It comes down to how you spend your money because, whether the wages that you give the player you're recruiting, the resale value, that is all kind of the consequences of them things will be in the accounts. You know what I mean? Yep. So that is a worry, I suppose, going forward because you look at last summer. Yes, there are a couple of players there with resale value. I mean, Bilal, for example, is probably the number one. But the other players, I Skip, where's the resale value there? And that will affect us in the future.
Yep, for sure. I mean, it all comes down to that, right? Because so much of our income is decided by where we finish in the league and what league we play in. Well, what league do we play in? Well, that depends on the manager. So our recruitment in terms of manager, the style of football we're playing, does it fit the players? And then the players we're recruiting. So much of that comes down to the decision-making at the top in terms of the signings and the manager. But one thing I did also notice in the account in terms of our turnover that was nice to see remain somewhat the same was the income from gate tickets. So the fans showed up
yes.
in the Championship. It barely got reduced. So that is obviously really good to see. It's nice to see the financial proof as well that the Leicester fans are backing the team if it's the Premier League or the Championship. So it provides a bit of a foundation for the club to have some guaranteed revenue. And it's really important, especially in the championship, that those gate revenues will matter more and more as the revenue from broadcasting right becomes less and less if we remain in the championship as well for a few years.
Yeah, you're bang on there because again, I know it's not up, but I've got it in front of me. So 18.3 million in 2024 in 2023, and again 18.3 million in 2024. So the gate receipts really didn't change. And as you say, it will probably be the same next year, similar number. But if you're then looking at back-to-back seasons in the championship, it's just natural. Less fans will go, and that number will drop. So yeah. There's a comment here from Sean. Unless you do a hard reset and take all the hits that come with it, yes, these numbers have improved, Doc, but you could even argue last summer wasn't a real reset. Yes, we lost some players, but there is potential there this summer to do an even bigger reset and improve the finances even more.
For sure. Absolutely. I mean, it all depends on if we're able to sell the deadwood as well, because I think that's the main difference. We didn't do that when we got relegated, right? Because, I mean, some of the guys who we were unsure about, they went out on loan instead of going permanently. And we were only really able to sell the quality players. Maybe you could say Timothy Castagne was, middle of the pack there. But we held on to a lot of it. And I think that will be the difference this time. A lot of the mediocre players will go. A few of the great ones, like Mads Hermansen, will go, and maybe a Bilal Kanouche as well, or an Abdul Fattah. But this feels like a bigger clear out to me, and really that obvious chance to reset fully, because so many of those last few big top 4 fighting club contracts are starting to run down. Your Danny Ward, your Daniel Iversen, these players that were paid way too much for what they bring to the team will be running out. And then we still have a few dumb contracts like a Connor Cody sitting on so much wage. We don't know what Yannick Vestergaard is on. So we still have some high earners, and I don't think that's bad if it's just a few. The problem is everyone, and especially what they added to the team, right, got paid way more. If you single-handedly bring us back to the Prem, I don't mind if you're on a big wage, but when people who can barely get on the bench get paid 100K a week, then we have an issue.
Yeah, 100%. Last couple comments here. Do the players have clauses to take wage cuts when relegation occurs? I mean, especially this summer, they would have been, because we were flirting. We were always going to be in a battle of some kind. And I think the 3 we signed, or the 2 we signed permanent in the January of 2023, so Christiansen and Suter, they would have definitely been given relegation reductions. But there was something weird that happened, Doc, that, we heard stories that most players actually had their wage reduced upon relegation.
I think that is
It could have been voluntary. Some of them could have been voluntary.
Who knows? I mean, we won't know for sure. What I will say about the clauses is we don't know exactly who had it, except for the few that has been reported when they got signed in the winter, right? And the signings now that we went back up. But they said one of the reasons they were able to do this cost-cutting exercise, as they called it, was due to transfer or contract clauses that had the wages reduced. We don't know of how many players, we don't know of exactly who, but they themselves said there was a big part, and that's all I can go out from and say it definitely mattered, and a lot of them probably had it if it was a major part of the cost-cutting.
Yeah, 100%. And the final comment here, Peaches says, your finances don't even look too bad, should have risked breaking PSR to stay. Well, this is the thing, Doc. We don't know what they look like this year yet, and it could well be problematic, Doc. We're saying it looks like it's on the right track, but we weren't able to sign in January. Maybe, just maybe, it's not looking so great this year, which is why we didn't sign anyone in January. Although the club have been very keen in expressing that the reason we didn't sign in January was just because the right player didn't come up. That seems to be the message from the club. Nothing to do with PSR, apparently. But
I think it's maybe if your limit for what you can spend on the perfect player is £1 million, there's less likelihood of the right player showing up, right? I think maybe just twisting the words in a way that you really want. So, I mean, there is probably some truth in it, but maybe not the full truth.
Yeah, 100%. Nice to see David making friends with Peachy. There's some Forest fans that watch this channel. There's an Everton fan, Daniel, who's in the chat. He watches it. everyone's more than welcome as long as they're not trolling. That's when they get booted out. But no one's trolling in the chat today. Doc, I think that brings it to a close, mate. Thank you very much for your help in all of that, for bringing all the information that everybody wants to know. I think it's really tough, isn't it, with the accounts, trying to work it all out. And obviously, as you said, we don't know everything, and some of it is guesswork. But but you've done a good job of kind of breaking it down as much as you can.
Yeah. Thank you. There is, if there's one last question in terms of the parachute payments, we can quickly take that before we end it, Lux. I think it's a very
how much?
Yeah, I believe, and this is from what I remember having looked around on the internet. At the first year, it's 50%, and then it gets reduced to like 30, then 25, 20, or maybe 25 next season, then 20, until it then disappears, I believe, after 3 years. So the first season, you have 50% of it, and that's why we had such a high broadcasting revenue compared to other championship clubs when we were there. But yeah, so after a few seasons, that effect will be diminished more and more until it doesn't matter.
Sorry,
VK still shit.
Mate, I've been trying not to laugh at that, man. I'm sorry, that was so funny, Richard. How he just dropped that. Well done, VK. They say it like
I will
you're
not
his brother.
VK like... by the
way. They say it like it's your brother, that they're just trying to like. That's funny. Well done, Richard. Yeah, we don't know the full number planet Earth. I mean, there's information out there on the internet that you can try and find. I mean, some clubs like Norwich, for example, they used to love it, didn't they? Coming down, coming up, going down, coming up, and claiming that money. But yeah, you just don't want to get stuck down there, because Norwich have got stuck down there now, and yeah. But okay, I think that's it. Doc, again, thank you, mate. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. Everybody in the chat, make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to hit subscribe. We are going to be back live tomorrow at the same time, 7 p.m. Anil is going to be here with Josh doing the analysis for the Man City game. So that's going to be interesting. If you like, it's like those crazy people that like pain. What are they called? I can't remember the name of them. I'm getting into dangerous territory here, but people that like being
at the very least. In Danish, it's masochist, those who like pain on themselves.
Okay, well, yeah, people like being spanks, and sorry, we're getting into a dangerous territory.
Different conversation.
Hey, if you want to watch the analysis, mate, I mean, it's going to be interesting for sure, because we'll get a proper look at how bad we really are. So yeah, 7 p.m. tomorrow. Anil and Josh will be here for that, so make sure to join us for that one. Again, cheers, Doc. Cheers to everybody in the chat. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Cheers.